Welcome to the Optimist Club of Covington's Candidate Speaker Series. Welcome to our guests here at Pee Wee's Place in Crescent Springs, and welcome to our guest viewing on the Telecommunications Board of Northern Kentucky. My name is Dan Humpert, and I am the president of the club. I want to thank Pee Wee's Place for providing their facilities for our event, and I want to thank the Telecommunication Board of Northern Kentucky for rebroadcasting this event to the viewing public. These sessions can be viewed on Thursday nights at 9 p.m. on TBNK Channel 15. So thank you, Pee Wee's Place, and thank you, TBNK. One of the missions of the club is education. With this speaker series, we hope to inform the public of the races that are important to the citizens of Northern Kentucky, specifically the local races in the Kenton County primary in May. Over the next 12 weeks, we will have candidates for these offices presenting to the club. The public is invited to attend. The program agenda is that I will give each candidate 10 to 15 minutes to present their background and platform, and then there'll be 3 speakers that we ask of each of the candidates in a specific race. There'll be a break where we have lunch. We'll come back and the audience can ask questions via the file cards that are on the table, and then there'll be a few minutes for closing remarks from the candidate. It's my pleasure to introduce the wife of the candidate who's going to introduce the candidate. My pleasure, Beth Redwine.
Thank you, Dan, for that introduction, and thank you for inviting us here to be with you today. I'm sure that when a candidate's spouse introduces them, you expect them to say, he or she is my best friend, he or she will make the best person for this position, and he or she deserves your vote. And I believe all of that. But I think you'd probably like a little insight on Jim that he may not share. When we first met in law school, what really impressed me, while I had some doubts about being in law school, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, but I found law school daunting. He was the most positive person I ever met about how sure he wanted to be a lawyer and how much he loved the law. And when we first met, I was thrilled by his laugh. When something really tickles him, he has the most wonderful laugh. And you couple that with somebody who has tremendous love and appreciation and respect for the law, and it was the beginning of a great and wonderful relationship. 30 years later, we're going to celebrate our anniversary in May. And without too much further ado, I'd like to introduce my husband, and I hope that you enjoy what he has to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you for that introduction. I want to thank the Optimist Club for inviting me to speak and for holding these forums. Your organization is providing an important service to our community to be informed about the candidates and the issues that the community is facing. To be here before you to present my candidacy is both a privilege and an honor. Thank goodness Mother Nature has given us a reprieve in this weather. Last week during a recess, I was talking to one of the policemen there, and he was talking about one of the mornings when it was 8 below outside, and he'd come into contact with a fellow that he needed to stop, and he said, "Freeze!" And the guy did. I am running for circuit judge here in Kenton County, and I want to tell you a little bit about myself and my background and my experience. I grew up in a small eastern Kentucky community called Sandy Hook, which is in Elliott County. It's a small community on the Little Sandy River, and it lies just east of Moorhead. The town itself, when I was there in the early 60s and 70s, had a little more than 400 folks. My family has been in Elliott County for many, many years and several generations. I come from a long line of lawyers. My great-grandfather, Matthew Marion Redwine, was the Commonwealth attorney for that circuit for many years, and he later served as a circuit court judge. My grandfather, Virgil Homer Redwine, served as many years as the county attorney for Elliott County. And I remember that after he had left that office, he was still in practice, and at 84 years of age, he was still going to his law office every day. My family moved to Lexington, Kentucky in the early 70s, where I finished high school, and I later enrolled and graduated from the University of Kentucky. While I grew up in eastern Kentucky, northern Kentucky has now been my home for over 30 years. I'm a Chase Law School graduate, and as Beth said, we met in law school. And it was one of the luckiest things that has ever happened in my life. It is here in northern Kentucky that we have made our home. It is here that we have raised our family. It is here that I call home. I've had a varied legal career. I first started for the practice of law with a small firm by the name of Osborne, Hillman and Trustee. It was a general practice firm representing both plaintiffs and defendants, and I did all the things that a young associate does, helping with depositions, legal research, writing, helping the partners prepare for trial, and even assisting them in trial. I also started my own practice in developing clients. And it was from that work I made contact with a surgical group by the name of Northern Kentucky Orthopedic Associates. Because of my legal work there, I had the opportunity to become the business manager of that surgical group. There I managed it was a 7-surgeon group and had over 30 employees. At the time that I was there, it was at the forefront of the managed care revolution that was going through the medical community. My legal experience helped that surgical group in navigating the alphabet of the insurance plans that were coming along, the HMOs and PPOs and that sort of thing. My legal experience and background helped that surgical group in negotiating with the insurance companies and being able to be fairly compensated for their work and also the contract terms that the insurance companies were planning. I represented the surgical group in various administrative proceedings and learned about the value of employees and how to help employees achieve their goals in a workplace as well. As fulfilling, as rewarding as that work was, to be honest, I missed the practice of law. I missed being in a courtroom. And there I left the group and joined a classmate, a law school classmate, Ken Reed. And he had a small firm here in northern Kentucky. It was a general practice firm, and we represented individuals as well as some businesses. While there, I was a contract employee for the Northern Kentucky Public Defender's Office, and as well as representing my own private criminal clients. During this time, I had an association, or I became associated with the Northern Kentucky Children's Law Center. At the time, the Children's Law Center had a grant to represent all juveniles that were being held in the adult Kenton County Jail. It was from that work that led to the closing of holding juveniles in an adult jail and the opening of the regional juvenile detention facility, and it is work for which I am proud. In 1994, Gary Edmondson approached me to join his staff as an assistant county attorney. I agreed, and my career as a prosecutor began. I was with Mr. Edmondson for 5 years, and it allowed me to hone my skills as a trial attorney. The volume of cases at the misdemeanor level gave me the opportunity to be in court almost daily. However, I wanted more responsibility to prosecute more serious crimes, and in 1999, Don Buring gave me that opportunity. I have been a felony prosecutor ever since. I have served the last 14 years as an assistant Commonwealth attorney, the past 7 of which I have been the first assistant for our Commonwealth attorney here in Kenton County, Rob Sanders, and it is a position that I enjoy and am very proud to serve in. In this position, I have successfully prosecuted some of the most heinous and cruel criminals ever to step foot in a courtroom. I am proud of the fact that I have held people responsible for the crimes that they've committed upon our community. I am proud of the role that I have played in protecting our community. My experience both as a defense attorney and as a prosecutor has taught me that justice is more than just the imposition of the maximum sentence. Justice is served when mercy is shown. Justice is served when restraint is exercised. There are people who make mistakes. There are people who are criminals. I believe I have learned the difference. I tell you all this for a reason. I want you to understand that I have seen the courtroom from virtually every perspective. I have the experience, the knowledge, and the temperament to be the kind of circuit judge that you want your county to have. This election is about experience, but it's about other issues as well. It's about fairness. All of us expect a judge to be fair, but what does that mean? To me, it means that regardless of race, creed, or social standing, that the rules will be applied equally and evenly to all, that the facts will be decided objectively and the law applied impartially. Be assured that although I have spent the last 14 years as a prosecutor, I will fairly preside over every case that comes before me. I have worked closely with many of our police departments through the years. There have been times that I have declined to prosecute cases that have been brought to me, or have resolved cases in a different way than the officers wished. Those were difficult decisions, but I made them in order to ensure justice and to achieve an objective that I believed was in the best interest of the community. As I said, this election is also about justice. Justice requires independence of thought and act. It requires the thoughtful application of the law to the facts. It requires the recognition of human frailties and shortcomings. The administration of justice is just as important to civil disputes as it is to criminal litigants. The expeditious resolution of civil disputes is no less important to the administration of justice than what occurs on the criminal side. I will be dedicated to ensure that civil litigants and their attorneys have their day in court. I have exercised independent judgment as an attorney and will continue to do so as your judge. I will follow the law and its dictates regardless of whether or not it is popular to do so. My commitment to justice is unwavering. I promise to execute the duties of circuit court judge honorably, honestly, and humbly. Finally, I want to make a distinction between myself and the other candidates that are going to appear you for circuit court judge. In my career, I have had over 120 jury trials. Do not forget that a circuit court is a trial court. No other candidate in this election has the number of jury trial experience that I do. In addition, no candidate here other than myself has both the civil and criminal trial experience. I have both. It is this that distinguishes me between myself and my opponents. I ask you for your support, and I ask you for your vote in this November election. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jim. We have 3 questions that we are going to ask of each of the district, the circuit judge candidates. The first question is, Northern Kentucky has had a serious heroin epidemic for some time now. What role can the circuit courts play in addressing the heroin epidemic?
Step back up. The circuit court can play a unique role. Understand that I have seen the heroin epidemic that has swept through northern Kentucky from the eyes of that of a prosecutor. No judge can say that they have seen the full impact of what heroin is doing to our community as a prosecutor can, because a judge does not see every case that where heroin has touched someone. I think you can look at heroin cases that do end up in circuit court in three very broad categories. First is the addict, the user who is caught with the possession of heroin. The judge has a unique opportunity there to force that individual into treatment. Understand that opiate addiction and heroin addiction is very different than almost any other drug that we are going to encounter because of just the desire, the addiction that heroin provides. Jail can give the incentive for that person to receive treatment because the individual learns pretty quickly that going to treatment is a much better alternative than being held in jail or going to prison for the addiction. So I believe that a circuit judge can look at that and help that person obtain treatment, even if initially they do not want to. I think the second broad category is looking at those individuals who are addicts who commit crimes. If we don't deal with it at the beginning, what I have seen as a prosecutor is that individual then develops and goes on to committing either property crimes or robbery crimes, or even sometimes exposing their children to various dangerous situations. It is not an uncommon occurrence for addicts to go to Ohio to over the Rhine and obtain their heroin, come back to Kentucky and start using the drugs while babies are in child seats in the back. I think those individuals need to be treated differently than the individual that is simply caught with their drugs. I see a distinction between there, and as a judge, I would treat those people differently. In addition to those people who commit property crimes, the burglars, the robbers, it's one thing to be an addict, but when you take your addiction and then become a danger to the store clerk or to the homeowner who has their home broken into, that individual needs to be treated differently. And then finally, I think where the circuit court judge can play a role is in the punishment of drug dealers. Heroin gets to the addict by a transaction. Somebody deals that drug. You're required as a judge to consider all the range of penalties. And I will promise you that drug dealers, and if I am elected, will be dealt with appropriately.
The second question is, one of the reasons that the Optimist are doing this program is for educating the public. What role does a circuit court judge have in educating the public about the justice system?
I think every elected official, regardless of office, has a duty to educate the public and the role that they play and their part of what they're doing, how it fits into our system of government. The court system is not one that the general public is going to have a lot of contact with. Fortunately, 99% of us will never ever be a criminal defendant. Most folks are not the victims of some automobile accident or have a contract dispute. So generally the public is not aware of what the court system does other than perhaps from headlines. I think judges can be more, and I promise to be more forthcoming in the community. My boss, Rob Sanders, has a policy that anytime any group asks him or one of his assistants to come forward to speak to a group, he's there. And I think that is a great policy, and it is one that I hope to carry forward as a circuit court judge. I think it's too easy for judges to claim I have to be impartial and not go forward to the public. I think you can be impartial and keep your impartiality as a judge to decide only the facts that come before you, but I think you can explain to the public what current controversies there are, what the laws are, and I think that can play an important role, and that is something that I would do as judge.
And we have a third question. Before I talk about the third question, there's file cards in front of the audience here at Pee Wee's Place. We'd like you to fill out questions to ask the candidate when we take a short break. So we'll take a short break after the third question. Northern Kentucky has had a rough economic climate the past 6 years. What impact have you seen, if any, on the operation of the circuit courts as a result of the recent recession and rough economic climate?
I think that's an excellent question, and I look at it as in some ways as a three-legged stool, or that there's three distinct parts to that. One is no one likes to pay taxes. I mean, no one likes that. And again, because the public's experience with the court system, sometimes we don't understand everything that a court does. A court, there are judges, but there's a large support staff which helps make the whole thing run. We are suffering in the courts throughout the Commonwealth of Kentucky of basically a brain drain. Wages have been stagnant for many, many years. And so it's an interesting position. People want to work in the court system because of well, it's just an interesting thing that we do. But because of the low wages, the moment that they have the opportunity to get another job, they're gone. And we're losing the best and brightest of the people that are in the court system because of wages. I think a second thing that the economic downturn has really hurt the courts is from technology. Kentucky still has not moved at all towards what they call electronic filing. That means all the papers that go through the court system is still done by paper. So many courts throughout our country have gone to what they call electronic filing, so that everything can be done through the computer and through email and that sort of thing. The federal government has had an electronic filing system, I'm not sure for how long, but for many, many years. And because of a lack of money, Kentucky is still very much a paper file system. And it increased the overall cost of it. And finally, the actual courtroom technology. The jurors expect, television drives us, and so many of our attitudes. The lack of technology of being able to present cases is limited by money. The second thing is simply workload. Kenton County actually has another district court judge position approved, and the caseload is there to justify it. The caseload can justify another district court judge in our county, but because of the downturn of the economics, we're unable to fill that position. And finally, I think the economic downturn has had another impact, and one that may not be necessarily intuitive, but the fact that there has been an economic downturn, it's driven caseloads, both on the criminal side as well as the civil side. Businesses are struggling, and there's more litigation because people are more willing to fight over that last dollar over some breach of contract, and also just the sheer number of mortgage foreclosures where folks have lost their jobs and not able to keep their mortgage payments up, and so caseloads have increased dramatically. So I think, to the question, I think it's three very distinct parts.
Thank you, Jim. And now this is where the audience has their chance to write down their questions, and we'll take a short break, and we'll be right back. Thank you. We're back. That was a fantastic lunch here at Pee Wee's. So those of you that are viewing on the Telecommunications Board of Northern Kentucky, we'd love to have you here at Pee Wee's and have a great lunch with us and get to meet the candidates. So we meet every Thursday, and for the next 3 Thursdays, we'll have candidates for this circuit judge seat. There's 5 candidates running for this circuit judge seat in the primary in Kenton County. All right, we have 3 questions from the audience here at Pee Wee's Place. And the first question is, how is your political party affiliation, I can't even read this. How has your political party affiliation driven your view of the law? There you go.
The short answer to that question is it hasn't. I am a registered Democrat. In my career, I have worked for 2 elected Democrats, and I worked for 3 elected Republicans. And my current boss, Rob Sanders, is a Republican. So to that extent, it hasn't. I can tell you that as a prosecutor, I have never asked a policeman, a victim, or a defendant what their political party was. I've made my decisions based upon what I believe the law is, the facts of the case, and that's what I've based my decisions upon.
The second question is, what would you do as a circuit court judge to prompt the efficient resolution of disputes?
I think there's 2 things that a circuit court judge can do there. I believe that encouraging parties to go to mediation, to informal, using mediators to mediate their disputes can oftentimes very much speed up the resolution of cases. Oftentimes the facts of a particular, I'm talking about on the civil side, the facts aren't really in dispute, and it's a question about damages, or maybe the damages aren't in dispute and maybe the facts are. Independent mediators can certainly speed that up. On the criminal side, I think what you do to the extent that you can is to make sure that there is a fast exchange of information that is required under the rules, discovery rules in the criminal cases, and promptly scheduling those cases for trial. Oftentimes either the defendant or even the prosecutors will delay in making a decision about whether or not to go to trial or to plead the case because they're not having their feet held to their fire by a firm trial date. And I think that's also true on the civil side, that sometimes trial dates and knowing that you are going to go to trial oftentimes encourages people to reach settlements. So on the civil side, I think mediation, firm trial dates, and certainly that's true on the criminal side as well.
And the third question is, attorneys are generally either civil or criminal attorneys. Which one is more important as a circuit judge?
In some ways, that's a trick question, I believe, because the folks that have a civil dispute that find themselves in circuit court, that is the most important thing in their life. To the individual that is accused of a crime, having their guilt or innocence determined is going to be the most important thing in their life. So, which is to say, to the individuals that are before that judge or in that court, which is more important, that's very difficult to say because it is so personal for that individual. Now, let me turn it around just a little bit. There are approximately, in each division of Kenton Circuit Court, there's approximately 1,100 to 1,200 civil cases a year. There's going to be approximately 350 to 360 criminal cases per division per year. Of that 1,100 to 1,200 civil cases, approximately 400 of those, plus or minus, are going to be cases that are referred to what they call the master commissioner, which means that the commissioner takes the evidence, makes a decision, and makes a recommendation. And most of those cases are going to be property disputes, the foreclosure actions. So in terms of workload, it's really sort of equal. But I will tell you this. For each division in the Kenton Circuit Court, they have what we call motion day or docket day. There is one civil docket per month for each division. There are 4 dockets per month for the criminal side. In the first division in Kenton Circuit Court in 2013, there were three, I believe there were 3 civil trials. There were 12 criminal trials. It is the criminal docket that drives circuit court. But to say which one's more important, from the individual that's in that civil case, that's the most important case. And I would treat it